Before we dive into today's story, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to deal with a Karen in your neighborhood? Let me know what happened because this one is wild. The wail of sirens tore through the calm evening air, their red and blue lights bouncing off the freshly painted houses of Ridgeview Lane. I stood on my porch, hands clenched around a half-empty mug of coffee, watching the patrol cars roll to a stop in front of my driveway. My wife, Elena, was beside me, calm, steady, her expression unreadable. The officer stepped out, scanning between us and the woman standing across the street with a phone pressed to her ear, pointing dramatically toward our home. That was Kerren Wilmore, the self-declared queen of the cul-de-sac. She'd called the cops on us. It was absurd but not unexpected. I'd seen the look in her eyes earlier that week, the one that said she wasn't used to people telling her no. But let's rewind a few days to when all this started, before the sirens, before the flashing lights, before Kerren decided to make us her personal project. When Elena and I moved to Ridgeview, we thought we'd found paradise. The lawns were trimmed like they'd been combed with a ruler, the mailboxes gleamed in identical silver, and neighbors waved with perfectly practiced smiles. We just bought our dream home after years of saving, a cozy two-story with a porch big enough for morning coffee and sunsets. And best of all, it wasn't under any HOA. That was the selling point. After years of apartment living and micromanaging landlords, we wanted freedom. But apparently, freedom was offensive to some people. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a neatly folded flyer taped to our door. Ridgeview Community Preservation Committee, it read in bold letters featuring rules about acceptable mailbox colors, lawn lengths, and even trash can placement. At the bottom, in looping cursive, was a name, Chairwoman Kerren Wilmore. I chuckled at first. It seemed harmless, like one of those overzealous neighborhood watch types. I tossed it in the recycling bin and went on with my day. The next morning, though, she appeared. Clipboard in hand, pastel sweater perfectly pressed, lips drawn into what she probably thought was a neighborly smile. "Good morning," she chirped, the kind of cheeriness that sounds like a warning. "I'm Kerren, head of our community committee. I noticed you haven't yet paid your neighborhood dues." "Dues?" I asked, puzzled. "Yes, $400 annually. It covers landscaping, streetlight maintenance, community security patrols, essentials. Most of us pay up front." I tried to be polite. "Oh, sorry. I think there's a misunderstanding. Our property isn't part of an HOA." Her smile twitched. "Oh, everyone here contributes. We're a community." "Sure," I said lightly, "but legally we're not required to." I checked the deed. "There's no active association here." The sweetness melted off her face like wax. "Well," she said slowly, "you should want to contribute. It's for the good of the neighborhood. We like to keep things uniform." Her eyes flicked over our freshly painted fence, the pale cedar tone she clearly disapproved of. Elena had come out by then, a quiet force in jeans and a soft blue blouse. "Is there a problem?" she asked evenly. Kerren gave her a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No problem, dear. Just explaining how things work around here." "Good," Elena said. "Because we like how things work, by the law." Kerren's cheeks flushed, but she turned on her heel with a huff. "We'll see how long that attitude lasts." I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, a bright yellow notice appeared on our door. "Violation notice, improper fence color." Below it, a demand for payment, signed again by Chairwoman Kerren Wilmore. I laughed out loud. "You've got to be kidding me." Elena didn't laugh. She took a picture of the notice, slipped it into a folder, and said quietly, "Keep everything. This woman's crossing a line." From that day on, the atmosphere in Ridgeview shifted. Neighbors who used to wave started avoiding eye contact. Trash bags we left at the curb were mysteriously torn open. A rock accidentally broke one of our porch lights. It was petty but persistent, a slow tightening of pressure. Kerren began making her daily rounds, phone camera in hand, muttering about violations and community standards. One afternoon, I caught her snapping photos of our yard. "Can I help you?" I called out. "I'm just documenting," she said brightly. "For the records." "What records?" Her smile was sharp. "Don't worry. You'll see soon." That night, Elena and I sat at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound between us. "She's forging HOA letters," Elena said finally. "That's mail fraud at the very least." "You think she actually believes she has authority?" "Oh, she does," Elena said. "And she's getting bolder. People like her don't stop unless someone makes them." I'd never seen her quite like that. Focused, professional, like she was analyzing a problem more than dealing with a neighbor. It wasn't anger. It was strategy. Over the next few days, Kerren escalated. Fake notices. New rules. One even threatened legal consequences for non-payment. She was desperate for control, spinning her fantasy of power tighter with every paper she printed. Then came the flyers, posted on every mailbox. Certain residents refused to comply with Ridgeview standards, risking our property values. Underneath, she'd printed a photo of our home. That was the first time I truly felt angry. I confronted her that evening as she strutted down the street, clipboard clutched like a badge. "You need to stop this, Kerren," I said firmly. "You're harassing us." She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "I'm simply enforcing rules." "There are no rules," I shot back. "There's no HOA here." "Oh, there will be," she said, smirking. "Once I reinstate it. And then you'll have no choice." Elena appeared at my side, voice calm but icy. "That's not how property law works." Kerren sneered. "What would you know about law?" Elena smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried a warning I couldn't quite place. "Enough." Kerren scoffed, storming off down the sidewalk, muttering something about outsiders who don't belong. That night, the wind carried the faint scent of cut grass and something sour, the stench of arrogance fermenting. Our porch light flickered where someone had pulled the bulb half loose. Elena watched the dark street quietly, then said, "Let her dig deeper. She's about to learn what real authority looks like." I didn't ask what she meant, not yet. But standing there in that perfect neighborhood under the hum of streetlights, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And somewhere across the cul-de-sac, Kerren was already planning her next move, one that would bring the police to our doorstep, and expose the last person she should have ever messed with. The morning sun had barely broken over Ridgeview when the first envelope arrived. It was slipped under our door, sealed with gold foil and stamped with the bold letters, "Ridgeview Homeowners Association, Legal Notice." The paper inside was absurdly official-looking, complete with a fake signature from President Kerren Wilmore, and a demand for immediate payment. Elena read it silently, her expression smooth and unreadable. "She's doubling down," she said, folding the letter neatly and slipping it into a growing folder on our counter. "She's trying to make this real through repetition." "She's forging legal documents," I muttered. "You think the neighbors actually believe her?" "They do," Elena replied softly. "Because it's easier to obey than to question." Outside, Kerren's morning patrol had begun. She strutted past our house like a self-anointed sheriff, phone camera aimed at lawns, bushes and garbage bins. She was meticulous, almost obsessive. It wasn't about community pride anymore, it was about control. By the end of the week, the neighborhood had transformed. Neighbors who once waved now avoided eye contact. Kerren had them convinced we were freeloaders ruining their paradise. I could feel their judgment every time I stepped outside. The murmurs, the sidelong glances, the unspoken fear of defying Kerren's rules. It wasn't just talk either. Small acts of hostility piled up like debris. Someone dumped their grass clippings onto our driveway. A neighbor's kid accidentally sprayed our fence with paint while washing his bike. Petty sabotage, coordinated under Kerren's invisible hand. Elena remained calm through it all. She documented everything, each letter, every conversation, even the license plate of the car that kept circling our house at night. When I asked why, she simply said, "Because evidence is how you end bullies like her." I started realizing there was more to my wife than I'd ever seen in our quiet suburban life. She wasn't just composed, she was tactical. Every time Kerren tried a new stunt, Elena responded like she was playing chess while Kerren was throwing checkers across the board. A few nights later, Kerren announced a neighborhood meeting. Flyers appeared on doors declaring it mandatory for all residents. Against my better judgment, we went. It was held in her living room, staged like a town hall, chairs lined up, a whiteboard filled with made-up regulations, and a giant pot of coffee that tasted like arrogance. When we arrived, conversation stopped. Kerren stood at the front, clipboard in hand, a smug smile plastered across her face. "Ah, the new residents," she said, voice dripping with condescension. "Welcome. We're just discussing how everyone can do their part to maintain our community's standards." Elena and I exchanged a glance. Kerren began pointing to her whiteboard like a teacher addressing unruly children. "We've had reports of non-compliant behavior, non-standard paint, irregular landscaping and even unsanctioned lighting fixtures." A murmur rippled through the room. I stood up. "There's no active HOA in Ridgeview. You can't issue fines, collect dues or enforce anything. You're not an authority." Kerren's jaw tightened, but she laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, Mark, we voted to reinstate the HOA. Democracy, you know. I looked around. You can't vote an HOA into existence. It requires legal reformation, county approval. Maybe in theory, she interrupted, but around here majority rules. And everyone agrees with me. I scanned the faces around us. Most people avoided eye contact, their silence a mix of fear and fatigue. Elena spoke for the first time, her voice calm but cutting. You're impersonating a legal entity, Mrs. Wilmore. You've distributed fraudulent documents and misrepresented authority. That's a federal offense. Kerren's smile faltered for half a second before she regained composure. Please, she said, her voice dripping with mock pity. I'm just keeping order. Some people don't understand community responsibility. There was a brittle silence. I could feel the tension vibrating through the air, the kind that only breaks when someone pushes too far. Kerren crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. If you don't like it, maybe you should move. We like people who fit in here. The words hung in the air like a dare. Elena's gaze hardened, but she said nothing. Instead, she rose from her chair, her tone measured. We're not going anywhere. We left the meeting in silence. Outside, the night air was cool and heavy with the smell of jasmine from a nearby garden. Elena didn't speak until we were halfway home. She's cornered herself, she said quietly. She thinks she's powerful because no one's challenged her yet. But she's crossed into legal territory now. I frowned. Legal territory? You mean like lawsuits? Elena's lips curved into a knowing smile. Worse. The next morning, Kerren's retaliation began. She posted photos of our house online with captions like, community violator, and refuses to pay dues. The posts spread among local neighborhood groups. People began whispering, judging, spreading her nonsense like gospel. It was surreal, how easily one person's delusion could warp reality for so many. By that evening, a county code inspector stopped by, an anonymous complaint about our illegal fencing. He took one look at our permit and shook his head. This complaint's bogus. You got someone on your case. Yeah, I sighed. Our self-appointed HOA queen. He gave me a sympathetic smile. Document everything. Folks like that dig their own graves. When I told Elena, she didn't even look surprised. She just nodded and said, then we'll help her dig faster. Kerren's patrols became daily theater. She walked the street like a soldier, snapping pictures, muttering under her breath about violations. The neighbors, once passive, started noticing the cracks in her authority. A few quietly approached us, apologizing for believing her lies. The tide was turning, but Kerren couldn't see it. She was too deep in her fantasy of control. That night, as the sun dipped below the houses, Elena sat on the porch with her laptop, the glow reflecting in her eyes. She's been sending forged notices through the mail, she said. That's a federal offense. Mail fraud, impersonation, harassment. She's about to get a reality check. What are you going to do? I asked. Nothing, yet, she said. Sometimes the best move is to let your opponent play one more losing hand. I could tell she was planning something that didn't involve yelling or revenge, but strategy. The next morning, I saw Kerren outside again, clipboard in hand, whispering to another neighbor. She turned as I stepped out, gave me that same smug, saccharine smile and said, enjoy your day, Mark. Some of us have responsibilities. Yeah, I said, watching her march away. And some of us know what those words actually mean. She didn't respond, but I caught the flicker of irritation in her eyes, the first crack in her porcelain confidence. As the sun set over Ridgeview, the perfect little neighborhood didn't feel so perfect anymore. The air carried tension, the kind that makes you glance over your shoulder even when you know you're in the right. Elena closed her laptop and looked at me. She'll push it too far soon, she said quietly. And when she does, that's when we'll end this. She spoke it like a promise, calm and certain. And across the street, Kerren Wilmore was already drafting her next letter. One that would finally push the conflict from a neighborhood squabble into something much bigger. Something she could never undo. It happened on a Saturday morning, one of those golden, deceptively peaceful days when everything seems calm before it breaks. The air smelled of cut grass and car wax, and the sound of sprinklers ticked rhythmically across the lawns. I was repainting the porch railing, brushing over the last scuffs of Kerren's latest violation photo, when I heard her voice slice through the quiet. That color isn't approved, she said sharply, standing at the edge of our driveway, phone already recording. You're in direct violation of community standards. I didn't look up. Kerren, there's no community standard. We've been through this. Her sandals clicked closer on the concrete. I'll have to issue a citation for this. You do that, I said evenly, focusing on my brushstroke. She stood there for a moment, clearly offended that her authority wasn't landing. Then she pulled out her phone, thumb tapping furiously. If you won't take responsibility, she said, voice rising, then I'll let the police handle it. I froze mid-brush. You're calling the cops because I'm painting my railing? For defacing community property, she snapped. You're making a scene. Elena, I called into the house. You might want to hear this. My wife appeared at the doorway, expression calm but eyes sharp. She's really doing this? Kerren had already stepped back to the curb, phone pressed to her ear, pacing like she was reporting a hostage situation. Yes, officer, they're refusing lawful orders, she said, her voice thick with self-importance. They're aggressive and non-compliant. Yes, I feel unsafe. The lie rolled off her tongue so easily that I almost laughed. Almost. When the distant siren began to wail, her smug expression returned. She folded her arms and smiled at us as though the cavalry was about to arrive in her honor. Within minutes, 2 squad cars rolled up. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, some stepping onto porches to watch. Kerren was in her element now, waving dramatically toward us as the officers stepped out. There they are, she announced. Those are the ones refusing to follow community regulations. The taller officer frowned. Ma'am, can you explain what exactly the issue is? Yes, she said, clutching her clipboard like a sacred text. They're painting with an unapproved color, they haven't paid their dues, and they've been hostile toward the neighborhood association. The officer exchanged a look with his partner. Neighborhood association? Yes, the Ridgeview HOA, Kerren said proudly. I'm the acting president. Elena stepped forward then, calm as a statue. Officers, she said, her tone level and professional, there is no active HOA in this area. It was dissolved 3 years ago. I have the county documents to prove it. Kerren gave a short laugh. Oh, please, she's just saying that to get out of paying fines. You can't trust everything you read online, officer. I'm the authority here. The shorter officer turned to her. Ma'am, we'll verify that, but unless there's a crime, this sounds like a civil disagreement. No, Kerren said, her voice rising in pitch. They're violating federal regulations, community code enforcement. Elena's expression didn't change, but something subtle shifted in her stance. She reached into her back pocket and pulled out a slim leather wallet. When she opened it, the sun caught on the metallic crest embossed inside. The taller officer's demeanor changed instantly. His posture straightened. Ma'am, he said respectfully, are you with the department? Elena nodded once. Federal Department of Housing Oversight and Compliance, she said. Field investigator. I oversee housing code compliance and HOA governance disputes in this district. Silence fell across the street. Kerren blinked. You're joking. Elena met her stare, her tone cool as steel. You've been impersonating a dissolved HOA, issuing fraudulent violation notices, and distributing fake legal documents through the mail. That's a federal crime, Mrs. Wilmore. Kerren's mouth opened but no sound came out. Her phone drooped slightly in her hand. The shorter officer stepped closer, looking between them. Mrs. Wilmore, we'll need to see the documents you've been issuing. Kerren stammered. It was just a community effort. I was keeping things organized. No one else was doing it. That doesn't grant you legal authority, Elena said. You've been using official-sounding language, collecting money under false pretenses and threatening homeowners. Do you understand how serious that is? The officers began asking questions. When she started sending the notices, how much money she'd collected, whether she had a charter or legal documentation. With every question her voice got smaller. Neighbors had gathered now, their curiosity evolving into whispers. Some filmed quietly from their porches. Kerren's queen of the neighborhood persona was dissolving in real time, the mask slipping as panic began to set in. One officer called something into his radio. The other started snapping photos of the fake letters she'd handed over, his brow furrowed. Kerren's confidence had completely vanished. Her clipboard now hung limp at her side like a broken shield. This is ridiculous, she muttered weakly. I was only trying to help. Everyone wanted structure. I was just trying to make it better. Elena studied her for a long moment. Better for who? There was no answer. The taller officer stepped forward. Mrs. Wilmore, we're going to need to take a statement from you. Please come with us to your property while we confirm a few details. Kerren's face had gone pale, her earlier arrogance drained into disbelief. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said quietly. As the officers escorted her back toward her driveway, the murmurs around us grew louder. Someone laughed softly. Another neighbor whispered, "Wait, she was never the HOA president?" The illusion had shattered. When they reached her porch, Kerren turned once, eyes wide and unfocused. For the first time since we'd met her, she looked genuinely small, cornered by a truth she couldn't manipulate. Elena exhaled slowly beside me, her gaze steady on the officers as they questioned her. I could see the weight she'd been carrying, the patience she'd held through weeks of harassment, finally start to ease. One of the officers approached us after a few minutes. "Mr. and Mrs. Turner," he said, "we appreciate your cooperation. It appears Mrs. Wilmore has been fabricating HOA authority and misusing residents' information. We'll be submitting this for further review. You may be contacted for a statement." Elena nodded. "Of course. I'll forward my report to the district office as well." As the patrol cars idled, Kerren's voice broke faintly in the distance, still trying to argue her case. But the officers weren't listening anymore. Her power, the illusion she'd built on bluster and fear, had collapsed under the weight of real authority. Neighbors began to drift back inside, shaking their heads. A few stopped to apologize quietly, shame flickering across their faces. One woman muttered, "I can't believe we actually paid her." When the last squad car rolled away, the street returned to an uneasy stillness. The only sound was the rustle of leaves in the warm wind. I turned to Elena. "So," I said slowly, "federal housing oversight, huh?" She gave a small smile. "I told you I deal with people who think they're above the law." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "You could have mentioned that before we moved into the land of the HOA wannabe." "I didn't think I'd need to," she replied, her tone teasing but her eyes still scanning the quiet street. For the first time in weeks, Ridgeview felt different, not safe, not yet, but honest. The facade had cracked. Elena gathered the folder of evidence from the porch table, tucking it under her arm. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "There'll be paperwork, reports, probably an investigation. But for now..." She looked across the street at Kerren's house, where the blinds had just snapped shut. "For now, I think she's learned who she's really dealing with." And as the sun sank behind the rooftops, painting the sky in deep oranges and bruised pinks, I knew Kerren's empire of intimidation had finally fallen. But somehow, deep down, I could tell this story still had one last twist left to play. The days following Kerren's confrontation felt strangely quiet, as if the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. For the first time since moving in, the air around Ridgeview didn't hum with gossip or judgment. The fake violation notices stopped. The committee flyers vanished. Even the online posts about uncooperative homeowners disappeared overnight. It was as if Kerren had been erased from her own stage. Still, the calm didn't feel like peace, it felt like the moment before thunder. On Monday morning, a white sedan with government plates pulled up outside our house. A man in a dark suit stepped out, greeted Elena with a nod, and handed her a thin envelope. After a short conversation, he drove away, leaving behind only a swirl of dust and curiosity. I watched her open it at the kitchen table. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes flicked over the page with deliberate focus. "The department's taking formal action," she said. "She's being investigated for impersonation, harassment, and fraudulent communication." I leaned against the counter. "So this is official?" Elena nodded. "It was official the moment she used the mail system to enforce her fake HOA. They take that seriously." For the next week, Ridgeview buzzed with rumors. Some said Kerren was facing fines. Others claimed she'd been arrested. The truth was quieter and crueler. She was under investigation, publicly embarrassed, and ostracized by the same people who once obeyed her without question. Every morning I saw her curtains twitch but never open. The pristine flowers she used to tend had wilted. The woman who once marched through the neighborhood issuing decrees now hid behind locked doors, her empire reduced to whispers. Then one afternoon while I was sweeping the porch, my phone buzzed with a message from a coworker. It was a screenshot of a local news headline, "Suburban woman under federal investigation for HOA fraud." Below it was Kerren's mugshot, stunned, tearful, disbelieving. The story detailed how she had collected over $6,000 in community dues from neighbors over the past 2 years, claiming to manage street repairs and landscaping that never existed. I showed Elena. She read it in silence, then let out a slow breath. "Justice moves quietly," she said. The story spread faster than wildfire. By evening, it had been picked up by regional stations, then by national social media pages. People were fascinated by the fake HOA president who picked a fight with a federal officer. Memes started appearing online, Kerren's mugshot captioned with phrases like, "When you find the wrong house," or "Local woman forgets who makes the rules." Even the neighbors who had once avoided us began stopping by, offering sheepish smiles and homemade pies. One man admitted he'd paid Kerren nearly $1,000. "I thought she was legit," he confessed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess we all did." Elena never gloated. She accepted their apologies with grace, her calm professionalism softening into something warmer. She even helped the victims file for restitution through the department's legal office. It wasn't about vengeance anymore, it was about restoration. A week later, we decided to host a neighborhood barbecue, the kind of easy gathering Ridgeview hadn't seen in years. The air was filled with the scent of grilled meat and laughter. Children ran barefoot across lawns that no one was afraid to decorate in their own style. Music played from a speaker on our porch, and for once the place felt human. Elena stood beside the grill, her sleeves rolled up, flipping burgers with the same precision she once used to file federal reports. I couldn't help but smile. "Feels different," I said. "It should," she replied. "People are breathing again." Across the street, Kerren's house remained dark, the windows drawn. No one had seen her in days. I felt a twinge of pity, but only a small one. Power built on intimidation always ends the same way, quietly and alone. As dusk settled, the crowd grew louder, the laughter richer. Someone handed me a beer. A group of neighbors raised their cups in our direction. "To the Turners," one called out. "And to the end of the fake HOA." The cheer that followed was loud enough to make the streetlights flicker. Elena raised her glass with a small, knowing smile. "To peace and proper documentation," she said. The moment was light-hearted, but beneath the laughter, there was a current of respect. Earned, not demanded. The kind Kerren had always tried to force but never understood. Later that evening, as the crowd began to disperse, a soft knock echoed from our porch. When I opened the door, Kerren stood there. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red from sleepless nights. The clipboard that had once symbolized her power was gone. "Elena," she said quietly, "I wanted to apologize." My wife joined me at the door, her face unreadable. Kerren swallowed hard. "I got carried away. I thought if I didn't keep control, everything would fall apart. People liked order. You didn't keep order," Elena said gently. "You imposed fear. That's not leadership." Kerren nodded, eyes glistening. "I know. I just wanted to matter." The words hung between them, heavy and raw. For a moment, I almost saw the woman beneath the caricature, the loneliness behind the control. Elena exhaled slowly. "You can fix things, Kerren. But first, you need to take responsibility. No pretending, no excuses." Kerren nodded again, murmured a broken thank you, and turned to leave. As she crossed the street, her figure seemed smaller, almost fragile under the flickering porch lights. Elena watched her go for a moment, then turned to me. "You can't teach humility," she said softly. "Life does that for you." The next morning, the neighborhood felt reborn. The mailboxes that once had to be identical were now painted in different colors: blue, green, even one with hand-painted flowers. The change was subtle but symbolic, a quiet rebellion against conformity. By evening, Elena received an official letter of commendation from her department, recognizing her for exposing a fraudulent housing operation. She placed it in a drawer as if it were just another file in her endless stack of cases. "You're not going to frame that?" I asked. She smiled. "The win isn't the paperwork. It's the quiet." Weeks later, Ridgeview finally became what it was meant to be, a community, not a kingdom. People stopped hiding behind their hedges. They talked, they shared, they lived freely. Sometimes, as the sun set over our little street, I'd see kids playing in the cul-de-sac, their laughter echoing where Kerren's orders once filled the air. The same sound that once began with sirens now ended in laughter. Elena would sit beside me on the porch, her coffee steaming in the golden light. "You know," I said one evening, "this might be the first time I actually love living in the suburbs." She laughed quietly. "That's because the HOA's gone." I grinned. "No, it's because of who's sitting next to me." She looked over, eyes soft but amused. "Careful," she said. "Flattery might get you another fence painting assignment." I laughed, and the sound mingled with the hum of crickets, the distant chatter of neighbors, and the low hiss of sprinklers, the music of peace restored. As the night deepened, I thought about everything that had happened: the fear, the tension, the fight, and the justice that followed. It had all led here, to this quiet moment where the world felt balanced again. They say karma doesn't always come fast. But sometimes it comes right to your doorstep, with sirens, paperwork, and a federal badge. And as the stars blinked to life above Ridgeview, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The woman who tried to police everyone's lives had been brought down not by anger, but by order, the one kind she could never control. Justice, I realized, isn't loud. It's steady, quiet, and absolute. And sometimes it lives right next door.